Hi artists, this is a demonstration video for our pattern background that we're going to do for our portrait. I'm going to do step by step. This is one that I have in progress right now that I started off with. So the materials that you're going to need are some computer paper, white paper, hopefully thin. For this one you actually want it a little bit thin like computer paper. And then a few sheets of 2" by 2" paper squares. Then you'll want a ruler and a pencil, and then a black pen or marker to make your patterns darker so you can trace them underneath your paper. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your paper squares that you've cut out and you're going to design a drawing on it that's going to become your pattern. It's going to be radial symmetry, which means it's going to go around a central point. So the first thing you want to do to make it a central point or to work for radial symmetry is you want to take your ruler and mark along two adjoining sides. So it's like where you see an L sort of. You're going to do equal marks. So for this one I'll do a 1/2 inch and maybe another inch away from that. And it doesn't matter how far away they are from each other. What matters is that these ones are the same distance apart. So on this side, you do the 1/2 inch right here, and you do the 1 inch right here. So if you look at it, you can see that these ones are the same and these ones are the same. And so then you just draw. You use your imagination. If you're going to do a circle, I use a quarter or a penny. I lost my quarter. But use like a dime or something for that. It makes the circles a lot easier. And if you're using more rounded lines, that's going to make it look a little bit more organic. And if you use straight lines, it's going to make it look a little bit more geometric. So that's something to think about while you're, and if you want to do straight lines with your ruler, you certainly can. That'll make it more accurate. If you don't use a ruler, it'll just look a little bit more hand-drawn, which is okay too. We'll make these two meet up. These are completely from your imagination. So just be creative, let your creative juices flow and have fun with it. But I will say that the more intricate the pattern that you start out with, the more time consuming it will be. So if this is something that will be tedious to you and you don't really enjoy making patterns, then make it a real simple one, and that's perfectly fine. And if you do enjoy it, then have fun with it and do whatever you'd like. So that could be a pattern. Here's some that I did just with practicing. And I chose this one for this pattern. So what you can see is it is a radial symmetrical piece. So it starts here and then it turns clockwise. Bloop. Then it turns clockwise. And then it turns clockwise. And you'll notice, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but then you'll do, once you have your 3, you'll pick which one you want to go with, and you'll take your computer sheet paper, and you're going to grid out your paper into 2" squares. It doesn't matter where you start. Like if you want to start in the middle so that there's a center square, that's fine, but it really doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. So 2 inches here, 2 inches there, 2 inch, 2 inch. Then here. Two inches here. And then across. And then meet those two up. And then do the same lengthwise. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And grid those out. So you'll have a bunch of 2 by 2 squares on your paper. You might want to put a sheet of paper underneath so that you don't get pencil marks all over your table that you're working on. Then for this one, I guess I'll choose a different pattern that I drew, or different drawing. Let's see, we'll do a more simple one. Do that one. All right, so what you're going to do is you're going to start under here, line it up under one of the squares as best you can. Then you're going to trace it. And if you want, you can use your black pen to trace it so you don't have to trace over it again. If it's a simple one, really anyway, you can just use a black one, because then you won't have to go back and redo it. And then right here, if it doesn't line up exactly, try to make sure it's lined up, and if it is and it still doesn't, then just fudge it a little bit and make it line up. It should line up if you did the measurements beforehand well, if that makes sense. And so each time that you switch squares, you think of this as your central point. So you've picked this one as your first one. This is your central point. So each time you move over to this is clockwise, so think of it as clockwise. Each time you move next clockwise, you rotate it. So I rotated it here. Now I'm going to spin it around. So now it's going to be there. If you can't see it very well through your paper, you could try putting it up against a window. It's kind of probably hard to hold your little 2 by 2 piece of paper though and still look through it. So that's why the thin paper is kind of important. Then rotate it again. So we have it here, and we're going to rotate it on that axis. Whoop, and it kind of makes almost a flower looking design. I like this one. It's definitely a little more simple than my last ones. So like if you add a bunch of lines and shapes to it, it will be more complicated, and it might look really cool. Just be prepared to do the extra work involved. My first one is a lot of lines, and it's a lot of work. It's taken a little bit longer than I thought it would. All right, so this is the first one. Now you have a couple options when you get to this point. You would start down here and do another one like that, or this way. But if you wanted to, you could go across here the same, or you can skip a space. So we could start here, and I like the way that looks. That's what I did with this one, and that's why they're not lined up side by side. Otherwise they would be right by each other. I skipped a spot, so it's right down here, so it has kind of a diagonal movement to it. So if you want to do that, then just instead of doing it here like you would if it was going straight across, just skip down one and start there. Once you have these ones all the way traced out, all your squares filled in, then you're going to move on to coloring them. And another thing to think about is if you don't want the outline of them very obvious, like say you were going to use watercolor, or you just didn't want a dark outline around yours, you could use pencil and just leave it as pencil, and then go in with your colors that you choose, markers, watercolors, anything, and then erase your pencil line to make it not have that outline. It'd be more like a kind of a fabric pattern looking. But if you want to do a darker outline, I used a darker outline for these ones, then this would be the time to do it. Do that dark outline, and then you go back in and you can erase all of your grid lines once you have all of your pattern drawn. So erase all your grid line, and then do the coloring, and it will look really, really good. And that will be, this took quite some time. So if it's the more complicated it is, the more time consuming it'll be, obviously. So this one would be a more simple example, and then this one would be a little bit more time consuming. All right, so if you have any questions, reach out to me. Be conscientious about your color choice. So I used green and red because they're contrasting colors, so they're really going to stand out. And I may go back in and maybe use watercolor back here to do the background. So be thinking about that while you're coloring your pattern. Okay, reach out to me if you have any questions.